The next thing we need to describe and explain, and actually the last part of our describe and explain, is how our sleep changes as we grow older. Obviously, babies have very different sleep patterns to adults, but actually our sleep patterns change quite a lot as we grow up, and the sleep patterns of younger kids are really very different to sleep patterns of older kids and adolescents. So if we think about babies first, um, babies have uh, a completely different sleep pattern to adults and to other children. If you think babies spend huge amounts of the days asleep, and in fact, they often spend kind of up to 16 hours a day asleep. And it can also take a lot longer to enter slow wave sleep. Often they spend, quite a lot of time in that lighter sleep stage, which means they're much easier to wake up. We know that, like when a baby's sleeping, everyone's super quiet because it's really easy to wake them up. That's because they're probably in light sleep. They do get into slow wave sleep and indeed REM sleep, but it takes them a lot longer. We're not entirely sure why. Babies are also much more likely to wake up at the end of a sleep cycle. So remember, a sleep cycle is light sleep, slow wave sleep, REM sleep, and then back around to light sleep. And most people will just go through that cycle. Sometimes we wake up at the end of the cycle, and babies are actually quite a lot more likely to wake up. They wake up after the end of most sleep cycles. So as you know, babies sleep often, but often not that for all that long at any kind of time. And they wake up constantly throughout the night. Um, it can take around, I don't know, about 6 months for babies to develop that consistent circadian rhythm to actually sync up with being asleep during the night and awake during the day. And sometimes it can take a lot longer, as I'm sure those of you with younger brothers and sisters might be aware of. Um, and scientists aren't really sure why this is, but they think it might be an adaptive behavior related to evolution. So younger babies need feeding much more often. So if they wake up and they're easier to wake up and they wake up more often, then they're more available to be fed and they might kind of be more noticed. Whereas if they sleep during the night, they might not get enough food. But again, that's only a theory. We're not really sure, as with so much stuff in the study of sleep. By about the age of 5, children have brainwave patterns similar to adults when they're asleep. So they're working their way through, light sleep, slow wave sleep, REM sleep, etc., in the same sort of ways, but they still sleep a lot more. So younger children sleep maybe 12 hours a day, so that they're much, they need more sleep and they find it much easier to get that sleep. And actually, little kids spend more of their time in REM sleep, which is about 30% of their total sleep time is REM sleep. Again, we're not sure why, but we're going to go on later to talk a little bit about the restoration theory, which is one of our key theories for this. And in restoration theory, it's posited this idea that, well, maybe REM sleep is used for neural development. So obviously younger kids need a lot of neural development. There's lots of new experiences going on, etc. So maybe that's why they spend more time in REM sleep. But again, we're not entirely sure. Now, during adolescence, young people's circadian rhythms shift dramatically. And you'll know this yourself. You're more awake late at night. You find it harder to get up in the morning. And it's actually almost like jet lag. Your circadian rhythms are shifted. Again, we're not quite sure why that is. Adolescent males may also experience orgasm and ejaculation during the night, which is very much less likely at other ages. And we think all of these different things that are going on with adolescents during their sleep is probably due to changes in hormones. We know that puberty is brought on during adolescence by hormones being released. And so we think that change in hormones, which would be quite dramatic, probably also has some aspect to do with sleep and changes in sleep, and perhaps interrupting that kind of natural circadian rhythm that we talk about.
And it can also lead to sleep deprivation. Typical adult sleep is around, it's probably about 8 hours per night. I mean, that's what it should be. Let's be honest with you, most adults don't get 8 hours per night, but it should be about 8 hours per night. And about 25% of adult sleep is spent in REM sleep. As adults grow older, their sleep patterns tend to stay quite constant. They don't change all that much until you reach old age. Now, in old age, old people spend a lot less time in slow wave sleep, and in fact, REM sleep as well. And the REM sleep is probably down to about 20% or so. Slow wave sleep down to 5%. Spend very little time in slow wave sleep. So old people tend to sleep less, and they also tend to get woken up quite. Have much lighter sleep. It's much easier to wake old people up as a consequence.